He has led research and contributed to publications, new letters, and data knowledge modules in the area of expertise. In the past, he worked with the TUV and NOD and IT Power and Zenith Energy. In his current role, BVIC is a successfully delivered multiple impact program of Canada Fund for Local Initiative, US Consulate, Super Canada, and SCL Foundation and other corporate companies. He is a part of the core strategic management team at the Balavikas International Center. So far, he has trained and shared his knowledge with over 300 international participants and 3,000 plus national participants. And as well as he has completed his master's in environmental science from, I can proudly say that, is from Usmania University and postgraduate diploma from the Hyderabad Central University and currently working as a currently pursuing masters in social work. And welcome you to the program, sir, and thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. So, Dr. Sashikala, you want to add anything, or can I go ahead with the session?
Ma'am, unmute your mic.
You can start your session, Vijay.
Okay. Thank you so much, and I'm really glad to be part of this short-term course. So for us, basically, if it is 1 week, it's pretty long-term. Maybe for academicians, I think 1 week is short-term course. But nevertheless, it's very interesting to be part of this initiative. And more importantly, I'm very happy. I have done I have done programs for international and national participants, but this is the first time I'm doing for my own department, Osmania University Environmental Department. That is something I feel even more happy about this. And I'm not used to delivering academic training programs. I generally train practitioners mostly. So I have done a very limited college related, academic related training program. So if any of my terminologies, any of the technical words I might use during the training 1 hour, next 1 hour, so please note down and feel free to ask any question towards the end of it. So I'll be glad to answer any. And so in between, I may ask you for your response. So just you can just type in chat, maybe yes, no, or anything, just to make sure that no, I'm not speaking to a lifeless machine, but I have 150 participants sitting in front of me. Just to I always believe that the online training can never replace the face-to-face session, because that is more interactive, eye to eye kind of training. But given the situation, given limited resources, and we can't all be coming and sitting at one place, I think this is the best mode that we have now. So let me go ahead. I think we had a excellent inaugural session in the morning and followed by another session, 2 sessions, I guess. So sorry, I'll start my session by sharing my screen. So I hope my screen is visible to all the participants. Karthik, can you confirm if it is fine? It's
yes,
yeah.
It is
okay.
visible.
Just one confirmation I would like to have. Did you play any videos so far in the previous sessions? Did you check if that is working, the functionality?
No, sir, we didn't play it.
Okay. That's okay. I have a very short video, 1.5 minutes, but let's see if it's working, we'll play, otherwise we'll skip it. So thank you for the very elaborate introduction. So I do all the work in environmental field and sustainability field, which as I already told. And this is my passion to share my knowledge with the potential participants across the spectrum. Let us go to the presentation without wasting much time. So let us start with the fundamental question. What is it all about? I'm sure we had discussed briefly about why we are doing it, what is green audit and all those things. But I think what I'm going to talk about, mostly from business perspective, I think it makes a lot more sense for us to understand this particular subject, this pattern. So I would quickly give maybe a 10 minutes of introduction before we actually dive into the core areas. So this is an evolving and contemporary topic. So when I passed out of my college about years back, so I mean, we didn't have any clue like what would have been our job opportunities and where are we going to place and what we'll do. Now I think over the past 1 decade, there is a lot of change and there's a lot of evolution in this area of environment sustainability, and there's a lot more clarity, and a lot more policies, treaties, and developments, international development that have shaped this particular ecosystem, and that is how it has been evolving, and it keep evolving. I think it will go slowly into the mainstream of the society. So that is first and foremost thing I would like to give. And secondly, this is multidisciplinary and broad topic, because if you look at maybe biotechnology or chemistry or physics, they are very specific, and anything that they work in very specifically in their core area. But there are topics like environmental science, sustainable development, they are a wide spectrum of coverage they will have, and hence you need to know about a lot more things than any other science or arts or math graduate, than the one who is going to work in this area or who's interested to do something in this area. And in continuation, this is a holistic agenda that we are talking about. And because I'm from business background, I work mostly in industries, so I take this from business perspective. Probably I think there are only 2 or 3 speakers from the industry in this 1 week program. So it give very strong business perspective to this particular subject, so that you will get get to know from all areas and all kind of dimensions how this topic is approached. And another important thing, this particular session, I'm approaching this session from a bird eye view, from a top of the pyramid view. So I'm not going to give you this is the formula that you have to calculate and this is how you will arrive at, but I'm giving you more of conceptual knowledge and coverage and where it is going, in which direction it is going, and if at all you have to do something in this area, and where you have to step next and how you have to take it forward is what I'm going to give in this. So this is what the expectation I want to set before going there. And the most interesting part is green. We are talking about green audit, green practices, green measures, etc. And what this green denotes to me is responsibility. And everything that we are talking about green here is directly, indirectly is pointing at our responsibility towards the environment, towards the society, towards the economy, towards other species, everything else that we have on this earth. So this green, anytime you hear green, you directly take into account this is a responsibility. Now we don't have a choice to escape from it. So that is how we need to approach. And I know a lot of people so talk about, I have planted 100 trees and I saved this earth, etc., etc. No, I think, yeah, you feel good about it. That's fine. But this is something we are doing for ourselves. So let us be very clear that all the green practices that we are doing it for ourselves. And I mean, some people may take it offensive, but we are the most selfish, species on the earth. So let us be clear of the fact. And we have changed the entire face of the earth, and we have put the earth into the danger zone. So that's a fact. So whether we accept or don't accept, but that's a fact. And hence, so we have to shoulder a lot more responsibility, being an intelligent species on this earth. And hence this green initiative and green responsibility becomes and has to be taken in its stride very seriously, by everybody living on this earth. And with that note, I think it applies to everyone. This green initiatives, green measures applies to individuals equally as organization, as well as governments, or for that matter, practically everything anything and everything, the living being that's consuming the earth resources. When I say living being, I'm talking about humans, because we are the one we are encroaching upon to other, others resources. So this is what I'm practically saying in terms of individuals, maybe organizations, maybe academic institutes, anything that involves consumption of resources, earth resources, and creating some sort of impact. So has to take this green initiatives and green practices. And green audits, so the very topic that we are going to discuss for the next 1 week, is one of the step. So one of the step in the entire cycle. So let us be like cognizant of that. And I'll show you broadly what happens in the entire cycle in my further slide. So you can just understand, see the big picture of where the audit comes, how many steps you have before even moving on to audit step. Yeah. So with that, let us see the next one. Why do we care? I have a worrisome phase of Earth here, and anybody can just give me some answer. Why is Earth worried? Anyone? I'm just looking at the chart. Why is Earth worried? Wow, good. Greenhouse gases, overload of waste, wonderful. Burden to bear. So what's happening to me, right? Pollution, wonderful. So I think everybody's listening to me sincerely. Thank you. Yeah, that's really great. So all what you are saying, yeah, it counts to that. And yes, the first and foremost thing that we have been observing from 18th century or mid of 18th century is pollution, environmental pollution. So we have been causing it, and we have been causing a lot of trouble with the environmental pollution to the earth. And it's not just, it didn't stop anywhere. It has been going on. And as our economic activity and this industrial activity has been going up and up, and we have been creating more and more and more pollution. And it again goes back to my earlier comments of being selfish. Irrespective of how many species are extinct, how many people are dying because of pollution, we don't care. We still continue to do that irresponsibly. So that is first thing. Yeah. And the second most important thing, climate change. So we have been come to know or discover the climate change in somewhere in 1960s. It has been happening, but we just realized with the scientific data that in 1960s sometime, that we started seeing that carbon dioxide has been going up in the environment, in the atmosphere, and it's going to cause global warming, and it's going to be a trouble for us. Yeah. And this one indicates the limited resources that we have. Because if you look at the fossil fuel resources, if we look at the mineral resources, if you look at a lot of other resources, including the forest that we are consuming day by day, they're all limited. The resources that we have on the earth are limited. And as the resources go depleting, what happens to a situation will go to a point where, there will be less amount of resources available, and there is a lot of money available at our disposal. So as a result, what happens? So you have to buy, like, probably, I think if you remember the example of Zimbabwe, I think 1 kg of tomato was, I think, 1 million equivalent dollars or so in their currency. So that is how demand supply can play. So at the end of the day, the resources are more valuable than just currency. It's just a color paper. So unless we balance these two, so it will not be sustainable. So we have to be very mindful of the resources that we are consuming, and there has to be very fine balance that we have to make sure between these two. And another important thing, biodiversity and supply chains. So if we disturb the ecology, if we disturb the biodiversity, it is going to have ramifying effects on everyone, everything that we are doing. So we may not realize directly overnight, but we can see a lot of things that are going to get affected. Diseases, in terms of food chain effect. I mean, locusts that we had recently, that is also a trouble that we have created probably somewhere in the biodiversity cycle. So lot of issues could happen, and then it could affect our food security, in a long term. And yeah, the species extinction is another risk that we will uh, be facing. So these are all the reasons why we have to care about these green practices, why we have to do something about it. Let us see some little more facts on this. Something we call ecological footprints. How many earths we need to survive, or how many earths are needed if we have to continue the same way we consume our resources. If you look at this global map, the ecological footprint of global map, there are very few countries which are in green, and unfortunately they're all mostly poor or middle income countries. So most of the Africa, India and Asian countries are in, like, the way they are consuming needs less than 1%. That means the earth in its current state can supply sustainably whatever we need the way we are consuming. And majority of the countries are in either orange or red. And of course the capitalist America is in, like, extreme red. So if we look at this, if we interpret this, America needs 4 earths, you know to survive the way they are consuming. To be sustainable, they need 4 earths for their supplies, the way they are consuming their resources. And rest, if you see Russia and Brazil and some more countries, I think Canada, and all these people will need somewhere between 1 earth, 1.5, more than 1 to 4 earth equivalents. And India and all, I think we are consuming relatively very less in terms of population, because we are densely populated. I think we need less than 1 earth. If you look at the global average, this is what we need. We need 1.5 earth. If we average this out, that how many earths we need to survive the way we are consuming our resources. So this is pretty unsustainable. Like, if we keep doing it, the fine balancing that I was talking about will get disturbed, and will be into a deep trouble. And the second one, climate change. So if we look at the climate change data, like world map, the way the risk is distributed, pretty surprising, because the one who was consuming the most unsustainable lifestyle that they have, Canada, United States and Australia. So those are the one who are mostly consuming the resources, very high intensive resource consumption, but who is facing the heat because of their overconsumption is the one who are in the green. If you see the African countries which were in green in terms of their consumption, India and Asian countries who are mostly in green in terms of their consumption, but when it comes to the climate change impacts, vulnerability, these are the countries which are going to get most affected. So doesn't it looks anywhere justifiable, the actions that some countries are doing, and the others who are actually not doing, actually were not the reason for all this chaos, but they have to face the heat. So this is what, if you look at global level, what happens, because of the unsustainable practices, unsustainable consumption that we. And this is another global map which shows, like, if you put the numbers into this thing, like, we can see US, China are the biggest emitters in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. Rest of them are minor. There's some heavyweight in Europe as well. And here is the most important thing. So if you see per capita emissions, I think if you see India is just above African countries. And if you see all the most developed advanced countries, the per capita emissions are like almost 15 to 20 times of India. And if you compare with African countries, they are almost like 100 times more. So this is how the the burden is distributed. The one who is causing is not actually facing the issues. The one who was actually not having enough money to spend, enough money to consume the resources, is actually paying the price for it. And so this is the climate change impact on the world in terms of the economic losses in billions of US dollars. And if you see the blue ones, the number of extreme events, they have been going up and up consistently over the past 20 years roughly. Like this data, Forbes data is up to 2016. So it almost doubled from 400 to 800. And if you look at the losses due to extreme weather events, I'm calling it, it could be cyclones, hurricanes, or tornadoes, or heat waves, droughts, anything which is out of human control and causing some losses to the economy, is the numbers are going up. And if you see the loss that they are making in something around average of 100 billion US dollars equivalent of losses, and it has been going up and up. So when in 90s it was somewhere close to 60 to 180 like that, and now we are looking at 100, 160 and 130 in 2016. Probably it is now 150 or even more. And this is the problem. And this is, we think that okay, climate change is somewhere and it's not affecting, but when you put things into perspective and look at things objectively, how things were 2 decades back and how things have changed now, if you put them all in the data matrix and look at the big picture, then you will understand what's happening. You will not feel on day to day like in the heat or rain or the cold, but if you look at these numbers, it will give you a clarity on how it is changing, how it is affecting us. And next, another important thing, of course, the environmental pollution, which is killing people early. So if you see, life expectancy is down by so and so years, and if you see, most of them are Asian countries or low income countries, so their life expectancies are gone by almost 1.5 to 2 years because of the pollution. And most importantly, we need to see 92% of the deaths occur in low and middle income countries, and children are most affected. So that's what we are seeing from the beginning of this presentation, that the one who is wealthy and affluent, they are the one causing the pollution, but they are not the one getting affected by it. And this is another information from World Health Organization. So every year around 7 million deaths are due to pollution across the world. And if you see, Southeast Asia region is mostly affected, highly affected, Western Pacific next, and then you see the green ones are Americas, blue ones. And if you see the economic burden on the GDP, this is how it is, like almost 5%, 6% of GDP of China, India, Russia is affected, is come directly attributed, the loss is directly attributed to the air pollution. And how is the air pollution causing this? Because people are suffering due to health issues, and then they have to spend a lot of money. There's a lot of loss of their productive man hours, and people have to take care of it. The entire system, governments have to work on it, reducing it. So there are a lot more things that will happen. It's a chain reaction in the background. And again, coming back after seeing all these things, then again the same question: why do we care? What is the purpose of this caring? What is that we are expecting at the end? Any anyone would like to give answer? Why do we care? What is the purpose of we bothering about all these things? What is that we want to achieve? Yes, good. We should survive. Sustainable future, good. Yeah. End of the day, it affects, protects from ozone depletion. Good life. Yeah. We can't live without Earth. Wonderful. So this is what it boils down to. Yeah, we if we have to survive, we have to make sure, whatever we are doing is sustainable. So at the end of the day, the purpose for all these practices, all these reasons to worry, is for a safe and sustainable future for human. And if we are not making sure, then no one else but we will be in trouble. So next is, why do we care is over. How do we care? Where do we start? So we know all the problem, we know all the reasons to be worried about, and now we have to do something about it. We can't just sit and see, like, let it set on its own. That doesn't happen. So now if we have to take care, we have to start somewhere very fundamental. Anyone know about this concept? What is it called? Any enthusiasts can type in. There's a term for this particular diagram. Yeah, triple P is definitely one. You can see triple P. There's another technical term for this. Okay. Okay. Yeah. This talks about sustainable development, but okay, fine. So this concept is called triple bottom line, and the bottom line is nothing but like bottom line concept comes from balance sheets, feasibility assessment, and balance sheets. Like, what are we going to get at the end of the day is what is a bottom line. And this is triple bottom line. And the three pillars of this triple bottom line are people, planet, profit, or in other words, social, economic, and environmental components. And if we put them together and if we overlap them together, if people and planet come into coexistence and be in synchrony, it becomes bearable. That means you can manage with the resources. And when you equate, sorry, balance people and profit, then it becomes equality. It brings in equality between countries. Like, whatever disparity that we were talking about, whatever the injustice that being served to the poor countries can be equated. And then when we talk about planet and profit, when we balance these two, it becomes viable. And if we combine all these things together, it becomes sustainable. So the sustainability is not just a simple word that simply talk about, but this is a combination of triple bottom line components and overlapping them together and all of them together. This is what it is. And this is the fundamental of the sustainability or green practices or anything that you talk about green. This is where it boils down to. So this is something I think you have to keep in mind if you're an environmental and sustainability professional. And another important thing, so from that triple bottom line fundamental, that is very fundamental, and we come to this sustainable development goals. I think most of you are aware of SDGs, and these are the most talked about in the environmental circles and sustainability forums. And this is something we have to take care or act upon for the next 15 years. Of course, 5 years already over, another 10 years we have to work on this. There are 17 goals, and all the organizations are looking forward to align themselves, their objectives and priorities to this SDGs. And if you have to survive, and if you have to make sure that everything is as we plan, as we want it to be, so we have to adapt to these SDGs. And there are reports. I don't have enough time to get into all these things, but there are reports of Forbes and KPMGs and big four companies. The corporate companies, the big giant companies, are planning to invest, re-strategizing their business goals and objectives, and ready to put in billions of dollars in aligning their entire business operation to this sustainable development goals. So that means that somewhere or the other, this money is going to be pumped into green practices and green businesses. And that is what we have to be like keeping in mind. So when we are when we want to work in this area, when we want to do something in this area. So we also have to look at like what's happening at global level, where those investments are going, where these funds are going. And I remember recently Jeff Bezos of Amazon, he has created a Green Earth Fund, if I'm not wrong. So which he has given, I think, few billions of dollars towards that. And even Facebook has created another fund. So there are a lot of funds, and Bills and Melinda Foundation, Gates Foundation. So there are for a lot of foundations coming up with a lot of funds towards achieving these sustainable development goals. So I think it will be good if you keep track of them and understand where that, you know, development funds are going. So that would be helpful. And so I'm going to talk about three things in the next few slides. So they could be potentially confusing a bit, but let me give you in advance what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about green practices, this slide, and then green concepts, and then green frameworks and guidelines. So these are three levels that I'm talking about. The first level, green and responsible practices, are something you practice on ground. So these are straight away, you just pick them and go and implement. Concepts are something which is at next level, higher level, where there are multiple practices, multiple of these practices which I am going to show are going to be embedded, going to be integrated under each concept. So a concept could have one practice, or like maybe 5 practices or 10 practices, green practices. And again, the practices and the concepts and the framework guidelines I'm going to show, I mostly covered the most popular ones, most of them, but there could be still a lot more out there. So it is not like 100% list, but it will give you enough knowledge and information about what they are, and what you have to look forward to in these areas. So if you see the practices, resource optimization, like lean process, is something that is one of the green practices that companies and businesses are adopting, where you reduce the operations to the extent possible, where your the manufacturing or production is not affected, but at the same time you are not over consuming the resources or inputs that are going into it. So that is resource optimization or lean practices. Or it could also involve recovering and reintroducing the resources that are going as waste, like recovering the waste and again putting back into the system, so that you're optimizing your resources basically. Renewable energy, I think I don't need to talk much about it. All of you know the solar, wind, and geothermal, everything else, biomass, all the energy that going to come into it's one of the practices. Energy efficiency is another practice, like where we are going to replace with more efficient practices or more efficient machinery or products. Um, Biofuels and energy, yeah, and this is different from biomass energy, which falls under renewable energy. Biofuels is like biodiesel is one thing, and fuel cells, all those which are not causing any pollution, but meeting your energy needs by replacing fossil fuels. Fuel switching is another, like going from more intense fuels to less intensive fuels in terms of pollution, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions or damage to the environment. And one simple, easy to understand thing, like the LPG scheme of government of India. If you look at, like they ask people to switch from firewood stoves to LPG, so which is less polluting and less environmentally damaging. And if you look at industrial level, maybe rice husk or biomass switching from coal is another fuel switching option. So these are all fuel switch where you are switching from highly polluting, highly intensive fuel to less intensive, less polluting fuel, but without compromising the quality and productivity. Water conservation is another practice, as you know, like saving water, water efficiencies, check dams, or optimizing leakages, anything that comes under water conservation, even the water pits, all those things. Everything will come under water conservation. Responsible sourcing is another thing. Like if you are sourcing some product from your supply chain, make sure that your supply chains are not creating a lot more pollution than what you are delivering. So if you look at plastic recycling industry is one such easy example where, you know, we say we are recycling plastic, 100% recycling, etc., etc., etc. But I practically went to small and medium scale industries in Hyderabad and different places and have seen the recycling process is causing more pollution than what if you leave them alone, because they have to do a lot of cleaning and again with chemicals, and again they just leave it like that without treating them. So I'm not talking about recycling as a concept is bad, but the way we are adopting it, there is no monitoring system, there is no regulatory authority looking after it, and nobody cares about it. What all they care about is just money by just cleaning them and creating pellets out of it and selling back. So this is what is happening in the name of recycling. So when a company or a business or an academic institute sourcing their products, it could be paper, it could be plastic, it could be anything, make sure that your supply chains are not irresponsible. That is something is one of the green practices, not creating more pollution. Alternative materials is something like fuel switching. You can also switch from one material to another material in your production or maybe operation or anything. One simple example could be if you look at our refrigerators. There was we used to have hydrofluorocarbons which used to be highly polluting, ozone damaging before. Now almost all the refrigerators, chilling related equipment are now free from that pollutants. Now they are using alternative material, alternative gas for that matter, so which is not environmentally damaging. So that is one practice. Reduce, reuse, recycle is of course another practice which can be easily done. Each one of them now we can talk about for quite some time. If you reduce is like you are at source, you are just reducing the amount of using stuff. Using 4 tissue papers to just wipe your face, maybe you just try to optimize to use 2. That itself is reduction. That is reduce. Reuse, maybe instead of just using the plastic carry bag, you just use a cloth bag or a gunny bag or anything which you can reuse multiple times, or maybe the same plastic bag that you bought can be used multiple times instead of just throwing it after one use. Recycling, of course, once you throw into the dustbin or garbage, that is a post damage control measure sort of thing. Like once you throw them, then you pick them back and recycle. The same plastic example that I have given you just before. Upcycling is something very interesting. Like you just straight away pick up the product from the waste or before it's dumped into the waste and directly reintroduce in the manufacturing cycle straight away without doing much processing. So this is very economically efficient and less resource consuming. And there is a lot of research and there's a lot of funding that is being looked into this particular aspect. Carpooling, yeah. So instead of just one fellow driving the car, you can just give somebody lift, or you may just go along with your co-workers and then reduce the carbon footprint. And a lot of companies are practicing this. They are doing carpooling of their employee, encouraging the employees who are in the same direction to do the carpooling. Given the corona situation now, it is not advisable, but before corona or maybe after corona, so this still makes a lot more sense to have this kind of efficient use of fuel, by optimizing your routes or optimizing the number of passengers travel together. Waste treatment, of course, and waste to wealth, like treatment of waste, like hazardous waste, you have to treat. There is no other option. But waste to wealth, like waste that can be converted into compost, that can be converted into energy. That is one option, a practice that you do. And there are a lot of campuses across the world which are zero waste. Like they don't dump waste outside their campus. They manage everything within Either they compost, either they treat or reuse it. The wastewater is used for gardening, etc., and the waste generated is composted and again used for the plants. So they are in itself within their campus, they are self-sustainable. So those are like zero waste treatments, I think, which you are probably aware of this concept. And afforestation and reforestation, green belt development, of course, is one practice I think widely adopted and practiced over decades by industries, by academic institutes, and by government, a lot of people. So afforestation is nothing but you are creating a new forest, new plantation. Reforestation is where the forest was already degraded, you are, again reforesting the forest with new plantation. So these are all broadly practices. There could be another 100 more, I don't know, even more, but this is what broadly the big concepts, big practices that we can look at. There could be a lot more sub practices that we can further break them down into. And next we are talking about concepts. So concepts are could be a little bit confusing and overlapping. One concept could also uh, cover another concept. One concept could cover multiple practices above that we talked about. I'll quickly take you through because each concept that I have given here, we can talk for 2 to 5 days. So they are that intensive. So I'll quickly talk about them. So responsible business practices, which is a buzzword now across the globe, which could practically take all the practices that we have talked about in the previous slide. So anything which directly or indirectly related to green or responsibility could fall into this. So this is like umbrella topic, everything can go into it. And corporate sustainability. So this is something very specific corporate practice, uh, taking into consideration their social and environmental economic aspects, integrating them into their business practices or businesses is corporate sustainability. And there is a lot more we'll see in the next, like what are the frameworks that what that cover corporate sustainability. And next, environmental sustainability, which focuses mainly on environment. Business responsibility, which is similar to the above practices. Then corporate social responsibility. So these three terms are used interchangeably: responsible business practices, business responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is little at a little more narrowed down level, but business responsibility, responsible business practices are very umbrella terms to consider. And CSR is nothing but your responsibility towards society environment through the channel is different. Like you are using your profits to spend on it, not integrating. No need not to integrate. You may integrate, but need not to integrate as a concept. Environmental friendliness, ecological friendly. So these are all product concept that can be adopted by different companies or product. Climate friendly, and the very popular concept of carbon footprint, carbon offsetting, carbon neutrality fall into it. Water footprint, yeah. So how much water you are consuming, for what you are consuming, etc. Green paper, FSC certified papers, Forest Stewardship Council certified. Like these are the papers where, like for we know that maybe for a bundle of paper we are cutting a tree, roughly. So these FSC certified papers are nothing but for every paper that you are using, you are planting a new tree in replacement of what you're consuming. As a result of your deforestation that has resulted due to your consumption, there is a compensation. Of course, these papers are little expensive because you have to compensate not just for the manufacturing production, but also for refurbishing the forest that you have already cut. And green investments as a concept is like the investment that flow into companies, maybe corporates, maybe startups, or maybe for academics, anywhere. So there is something called socially responsible investments as a concept. People want to invest only in those companies or those organizations who practice green. So this, why I'm giving this is green concept is, yeah, not just for the certification, not just for anything else, but this is also a bigger agenda for the survival of the organizations, even for for that matter governments. And I'll talk in the next framework. There is one point that details about it. Social and environmental entrepreneurship. Yeah, this is something I'm currently working on. Social entrepreneurship or environmental entrepreneurship is the ideas which solve social or environmental problem through business approach, is what in a simple term. So you are creating a solution that has a potential to create revenues, and at the same time it solves the business problem, it solves the social problems or environmental problems. So this is the concept of entrepreneurship when you attach, when you tag social or environmental aspects to it. And then sustainable cities, sustainable transport, these are all also at conceptual level. These are looking at entire city level, environmental preparedness, environmental impact, resilience, climate resilience, sustainable transportation. So all of them integrated into city level governance is sustainable cities concept. So similarly, sustainable transport, like when you integrate the transportation and promote the public transportation in such a way that you discourage the private usage, private vehicle usage, and reduce the dependency on the fossil fuels, reduce the dependency on personal vehicles. As a result, you are creating a sustainable transport. I think most of the developed countries, if you are aware, the public transport is pretty widely used. Probably only Asian and underdeveloped countries, the personal vehicles usage is very high. And one question that comes next, why are businesses caring? Of course, we have compelling reasons that we discussed about previously about, yeah, it's creating a lot of problem. We have to survive and we have to sustain. All that is good. If I give the same reasons to Trump, I think he will just say, this is all bullshit. I don't care about all that. But there is one more important reason that businesses are also looking at this is, yeah, something like this. The percentage of people who agree that they would pay more for eco-friendly. You see the percentage in terms of, this is broken in terms of age. Gen Z is the teen generation now. Currently, 58% of them ready to pay more for clean products, eco-friendly products. Millennials, 22 to 35, somewhere where I fall in, so are 61% ready to pay more. Gen X, the next generation, senior generation, 55%, and the elder most, are ready to pay 46% more. It gives an indication that as a society, we have warmed up to the idea of environmental awareness, taking care of environment, and doing something good for the environment gives back to us, and we are doing it for ourselves. I think that kind of consciousness has been built into our society is what this results indicate. And another slide which also gives such kind of information, though it is a little old study, but still now I think I would have added another 10-20% more in circle. So this is a percentage of consumers willing to pay price for sustainability. Sustainability is nothing but all the green practices. So in 2011 to 14, there's a drastic increase in terms of how people are paying, how people are willing to pay for products which are more sustainable, has increased drastically, and it is not just for one continent, it is across the globe. So every person, the sample that they have collected, are willing to pay more because they realized the fact that we need to take care of the environment. And this trend has been going up. So this is a study done by German organization which has taken global average plus Germany average, and it has been going up from 53% to 61% in 10 years. And that's roughly 12% of increase in the interest of people to go green basically. And I think in the next 5 years probably this will become 70% or maybe 80%. So this is a continuous stable trend that has been going up and up. There is no going back. And this is something, so these are all the reasons that I'm giving why companies are caring about it. Is the behavior of consumers is changing and the preferences are changing, and they are willing to pay more and they want to prefer companies who are offering that responsible products. environmentally, socially responsible products. So this is one of, just for information, I have given you an example of how the environmental social commitments are done at board level or strategic level. If you see, this is of Duke Realty's company's commitment. 100% of new developments pursuing LEED certification. LEED is leadership in environment, energy, design, is one of the world renowned recognized certification. So they want to get all the new development to be certified under this. This is nothing but one of the green certification, which has to go under green audit. And so the rest of them are related to social, employee volunteer hours, independent board members, diverse board members, employee participation. These are all social or governance related. And another 87% that they are talking about, portfolio using energy efficient lighting. So they want to make sure that 87% of their entire operations or entire properties to be fitted with energy efficient lighting. So these are the board level, high level decisions, and companies started doing it because they want to reap benefits out of it in a one way, and also showcase it to the customers and their consumers that yes, we care about environment and we are doing our bit towards it. And here comes the standards, frameworks, and guidelines. So we talked about the practices slide, and we talked about the concept slide, and then we have seen why these concepts are adopted by the corporates or businesses. And now we see like LED just before you have seen what kind of standards, frameworks, guidelines that are existing across the world. Some of them I have listed. GRI comes first, the Global Reporting Initiative, which is the most widely accepted and practiced corporate framework. So a lot of companies, this is considered one of the most reliable reporting systems, authentic reporting system. And now they are putting one step ahead with GRI. There used to be a separate GRI report. Now they are integrating that into company's annual report. Their GRI nothing but it indicates a quantified way of social environmental performances reported in their annual reports. So basically, how your social and environmental performance as a company, as an organization, is being monitored, measured, and reported as per the GRI standard or GRI framework. And this is again auditable standard. Either you can just measure, monitor, report, or you can also get it audited and then report. So we'll see the process next anyway. So, and the most popular standard, ISO 14001 environmental management system, which also is one of the standard in environmental category. ISO 14064 and 65, these talks about GHG, greenhouse gas, and carbon footprint related standard, which are related to climate change and climate change mitigation and greenhouse gas management. OECD is another important organization which has also issued guidelines in green practices and Carbon Disclosure Project is another project where a lot of corporates have reported what is their carbon footprint of their products or services or their organization as a whole. Gold Standard is another standard which talks about how projects, green projects can be certified and used for offset. Another one is voluntary carbon standards. IGBC, which is Indian Green Business Council, which certifies the green products, especially the buildings. In particular, it gives the platinum rating, gold rating, silver rating after auditing their environmental standards. GBCI is a global level body, which is Green Business Council, INC, Corporation INC, which also certifies green products and services. LEED, as we just before we have seen in Duke example, leadership in environment, energy, and design, so also certifies green products. AA 1000 series, we have 2-3 standards, principles under AA 1000 AS, which is stakeholder theory, social performance, accountability, everything comes into picture where the social and environmental aspects are being audited under these standards. One interesting thing, Dow Jones Sustainability Index is one thing where companies are listed based on their sustainability performance. So generally the listing happens in Sensex and all is based on their profit performance or economic performance. And this is purely on their social and environment performance, which they call it sustainability indices. And any company listing there has a lot of value that they can reap from their green listing. So in fact, many of the investors ask for this particular listing and where do you stand in Dow Jones Sustainability Index. This is based out of UK. And of course, UNFCCC, very long-standing and long working organization in this area, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, has clean development mechanism and joint implementation programs towards reducing the climate change impacts or mitigating climate change, and also one step ahead, adaptation of climate change effects. And social accountability, or SA 8000, is another popular standard in social performance, which also goes under one of the green standards. And finally, what I was talking before, the green mandates and audits by international lending institutes and banks like World Bank, ADB, IFC, IMF. These all people, they have their own green standards, social and environmental performances for the companies where they want to lend money, where they want to invest as an equity shareholder, or giving grant or fund for the development of the organization. So they they indicate all the instructions or guidances, they give it to them for implementation, and only once the organizations or the businesses meet these standards, which gets audited by their own auditors or an external auditor, they get the funding. So these are all broadly the standard frameworks and guidelines that we can look at, and there could be a few more which are in different areas. Like FSC is one, Forest Stewardship Council, which is certifying green paper. So there are a lot more in this area. So if you look at green practices, green audits, there are three principles, simple principles that have to be adopted. The first one is accountability. Any information that you are giving out, you have to be accountable. You can't say that today I have given like my product has 100 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Tomorrow you'll say, no, that's a mistake. It's 150, but I have given. No, so that you have to be accountable for what you have given. And if some of you may be aware of what happened to Volkswagen emission fraud that they have reported, they have manipulated their results and to get the certification, green certification, that product for whatever they have to get from the authorities. All the results are manipulated by tweaking their software. So that is accountability. So whatever you are reporting, whatever you are giving, it has to be, you have to be accountable for it. Transparency, yes, any information that you are giving should be transparent enough. Anybody should be able to verify, cross check. You say that I have given 150, but tomorrow you can't say, I don't know from where this 150 has come. Somehow I have got it. No. So it has to be like, you need to have a background information. You have to be transparent enough. Your systems and process have to be transparent enough to show that how you have arrived at this number. And you should be willing to show that. That's transparent. Credibility, yes, and the information that you have taken. Credibility comes when all your assumptions are backed up. All your data that you are taking has a solid evidence backup for it. You can't say one assumption, one key assumption, changing one simple key assumption could change the entire results. But are you taking ethical responsibility for taking that particular assumption or justification? This is where the credibility comes in. If you want to manipulate the result, you can do it, but that information will not be credible. Can you cross verify this information with some other organization, maybe organization like EPTRA, maybe NERI or somebody who have published some information, and that assumption if you are taking in your calculation, yes, that is credible. But they say maybe you have to multiply with 10, but you multiply with 5 so that your emissions will be less, and you have no idea or no backup why you have multiplied by 5 instead of 10. is where the credibility comes in. Like, so these are the three principles that we have to keep in mind. And this is the broad process. I think we already passed 3 minutes, maybe a few more minutes, I'll finish it off. Green practices process. This is what I see as a green practitioner or auditor. And again, this is from organization or business perspective. So first of all, you have to conceptualize. If you start in the extreme left, conceptualize what you want to do, then pilot this particular concept and see how it is working in your organization or company. Then once the pilot is done, based on that results, you adopt this particular concept further and then practice it for some time. And at the same time, the monitoring and practice will go hand in hand. And while monitoring, it doesn't mean just you just monitor and keep silent. You also implement corrective and preventive actions as needed when you are monitoring if the practice is not going as expected and there are errors that you have found during monitoring. And then once that is done, once you have achieved certain period, maybe 6 months or 1 year, then you measure whatever you have monitored, whatever data that you have come, then you measure that. And whatever measured goes for audit. So there is one simple saying that we keep telling to our audience: what measured gets managed. If you don't measure anything, you don't know where you are going. So measurement is very, very, very important. If your measurement is gone wrong, so everything before and after collapses. So measurement is very important. You need to have a very robust measurement mechanism in place, depending on what practices that you are adopting. Then goes for audit. So the audit can be internal or external based on what kind of authenticity or what kind of level of credibility that you want to go ahead with the audit. So it can be external, which costs something. It can be internal, or it can be anything. Maybe it could be even mandatory by the government. So depends on the situation. And once audit is done, disclose is like you're putting this information out to the public for consumption. So this is entirely optional. Like some organizations just keep this information for themselves and use for their improvement. And some organizations disclose this for public consumption and research and other information. And also they want to showcase, manage the expectations of their stakeholders, and also show that, yes, we are doing something about this. So it's all entirely optional. So this is the entire process. So I think now you understand where audit stands. So before audit, there are a lot more things that you have to do. If it is a big organization, if it is a small organization, or probably you are just adapting one practice, maybe you can quickly do all the previous process, 6 processes. But if you are going with an extensive green practices and audit process, I think it is pretty elaborative and long term. And what's our role? Like we talked a lot about businesses, but at individual level, we can do a lot of things. These are all some of the examples. I don't have much time. I'll just read out: energy efficiency appliances, switch off appliances, or keep them on standby mode, turn off the lights when leaving room, beware of overheating your home in winter, reduce internet use on your computer and phone, tablet. Like it means that just switch off your Wi-Fi when you are not using, so that the background apps won't keep running and you don't consume internet. Don't waste water. Start cycling or using public transport and carpooling instead of going on private vehicle. Recycle waste and use fewer disposable products. Cut down on paper. Change your eating habits. Like, of course, this is controversial, but yeah, so that also makes sense. Like if you're going vegetarian or vegan, you're definitely reducing your carbon footprint, because 1 kg of meat, production of 1 kg of meat requires 3 to 10 kgs of grains that are going into the tummy of the animal that you are eating. So that is entirely personal choice, but still it helps, is what the, yeah, where India stands. I'll quickly take you through the things. India's national climate, India's action plan on climate change is something which is released, which is pretty elaborate, and they have their own targets at what we are doing. We We are party to Kyoto and Paris Climate Pact. And of course, we have renewable energy goal. I'll show you in the next one. And we have domestic markets in place, renewable energy certificates, energy efficient certificates. And we also have new policies and acts and regulations that have come in place. I'm not talking about Air Act, Environmental Act, or no Waste Management Act. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about green practices, not compliances. So if this is what India's green target, it has decided renewable energy targets by 2022. This is 175 gigawatts of energy installation gigawatts that India is targeting, and you can see small hydro, biomass, rooftop solar, wind, and solar are going to play a major role in achieving this, by which our grid's emission intensity will come down. And so these are all some of the regulatory policy and law related acts and amendments that India has brought in. The first one is corporate governance voluntary guidelines issued in 2009 by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Then in 2011, we have got national voluntary guidelines from Government of India, which again talks about social, environmental, and economic responsibilities of businesses. And there are 9 principles, if you can see on the right side bottom of the slide. Those 9 principles, though it's not clearly visible, it's a freely accessible documents in the government portal. So which is again guideline, which is not mandating anything. But business responsibility reporting, BRR, by SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, in 2012 has given a notification that the top 100 BSE listed companies have to report their business responsibility mandatorily in their annual report. And that was further extended to 500 listed companies in 2016, and going forward probably it will be for another 1,000 companies. So this is mandatory. They have to report. They don't have to adhere to anything, but they have to report what they are doing in it. And but the last most intensive one, Companies Act 2013, which was released recently, and there are several amendments to it, which clearly mandates companies to spend on corporate social responsibility, which has Schedule 7, which talks about environmental responsibilities, social responsibilities, and government responsibilities. So there's a lot of things that you can spend your corporate social responsibility funds on, which mandates companies to spend 2% of profit. Of course, not all the companies, those companies which have certain turnover, profitability, and asset value. So to give you this information, any company which is making more than 5 crores of profit, any company which has more than 1,000 crores turnover, or any company which has more than 500 crores of assets. So he has to spend 2% of their average 3 years profit, the latest 3 years profit. So lastly, this is about our own publication. This is a research that we have done for the small and medium scale enterprises. So this is a research led by me, and I authored this particular publication, which talks about the business responsibility. I went and spoke to over 120 SMEs, directors, and CEOs and chairmen, and took their opinion of what is their social responsibility, what are the green practices that they have adopted, and have they adopted, have they not adopted, and if so, why they have adopted or why they have not adopted. So all those things we have taken, like the questionnaire was like from each company we have taken about 64 data points we have captured. Maybe like 20 are generic, but about 40 plus are very specific to social environmental responsibilities. So this is freely available on our website. If anyone interested, you can go to our website and access this publication, or you can ask me, I can give you the information. And this is one of the extract from that publication, how the business responsibility is seen with internal and external perspectives, social for both social and environmental. So these are all the variety of areas that we can look into when responsibility comes into play. So with this, I conclude the points why we are talking about green concept and why businesses are caring about it. Now it has come to a situation where the high level decisions are taken at board or apex bodies for sustainability, environmental and social responsibilities. And it has become a strategic priority and has been integrated into the core business operations of the companies. And there are a lot of international treaties and policies like Paris Climate Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, which was already there, and there are SDGs. So a lot of these things are putting pressure on the companies to adapt to these practices. Yeah, and large investments. When I talked about socially responsible investments, or the international banks, which are talking about, companies investing only in companies which are, really responsible or practicing sustainability. And another important case is evolving business case. Like in some of these not all these practices are burdensome for the companies, but some of them actually give back to them, to pay back to them. If you look at energy efficiency, if you look at renewable energy, they actually make business sense. But some of them may not, but some of them make a lot of business case. And if you combine and put them as a package, it becomes a very good business case, to propose to the board of the directors or the company management, top managements. And yes, that strong stakeholders interest, when I talk about consumers, when I talk about shareholders and investors. So all of these people have a lot of interest in performance of the organization in terms of the social and environmental. They don't want to associate with companies which are seen bad in the light of social and environmental performances, or which are doing bad to the society or the environment. So there is a strong stakeholders interest involved in it. And with all this, it brings a lot of new opportunities in these social and environmental areas. And the last words, it will not be a tribal agenda anymore. When I again talk back to my initial comments, like in 2005, 2006, I don't know what was the future and where are we going to work. Now it is not anymore. There are a lot more things that are happening in this area. I think it will be a mainstream agenda going forward, and a lot of opportunities for people, a lot of activities that will happen. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and sorry for taking 15 minutes more than what I was supposed to. Thank you so much. And if there are any questions, if you have time, I think we can take based on Dr. Shashikala's advice.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you very much. Sir, can we have any questions, sir?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. If time permits, we can take few questions then before closing.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Yes, yes, please, you can ask.
Yes, sir. Actually, these days, everyone will speak about pollution and sustainable development, but
Yeah.
there is no one I am seeing practically implementing it. So, how to take it to individual level and make it feel it's their responsibility too towards nature or earth? It's
Okay.
not like some people should do it. They are like see, the municipality will take care, otherwise
Correct.
the government should take care. No, but
Correct.
it's individual responsibility how to
Yes.
make them understand that.
Yes. It's a good question and valid question. And as I mentioned in my first slide, that it is not just responsibility of governments or organizations, it's also individuals' responsibility equally. And unless it starts at individuals level, I think it will go nowhere. Like if I'm preaching you all these green practices, and if I'm not practicing back at home, so then there's no point. It's just a theoretical session that results in nothing. So yeah, as you said, the environmental awareness is going up slowly as we are having more and more people, educated people coming into the society, and there is a more increased interest in education. People started sending more kids to the school, so they started understanding what it is, and there's a more focus on it. And I think now the environmental education is introduced into the curriculums. The new education policy is taking all these concepts in its stride even more seriously. So it is a gradual change. So we can't expect this to change overnight when there is a corona out there and everybody is scared, entire world is shivering, and we see people without wearing mask and roaming around freely as if like there is nothing. So it is not easy to change the mindsets of people. It happens slowly, but it will slowly happen, like in the advanced economies. And if you see especially Europe, they evolved because they industrialized much before us, and they have already seen all these problems. If you see, London once was one of the most polluted cities in the world, and they understood, they went through this cycle of facing all the issues, environmental issues, and they learned from it, and they have adopted and came out of it. So India being a very complex country in terms of cultures, in terms of diversity, in terms of economic disparities that we have, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of political parties, a lot of interests. So it will happen gradually. I can definitely say that it's much better than 10 years back, 20 years back. It will happen. And but rather more importantly, I think we should give this information more seriously at school level, so that kids will ingrain this particular qualities, like how we are talking about citizen responsibilities and individual responsibilities, hygiene. The same way we should also teach kids what is environmental responsibility, what is climate responsibility, what is social responsibility. I think at that level, if we intervene, this will start changing. Yeah.
Hello,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is Dr. Nikhat Naqvi from Nagpur. I have one query.
Yes, please.
Can I ask, sir?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Sir, in NAC criterion 7, this green audit part is there
Yeah.
for assessment.
Yeah.
So they have mentioned energy audit, environment audit, and green audit. So what is the difference? Because they are all overlapping as far as my understanding is there. Energy audit,
Yeah.
environment audit, and green audit. So is there some fine line, or are they all overlapping? So how do we deal with that point?
Okay. See, okay, there are two things. One is, first of all, I already mentioned green audit is an umbrella term. So green audit encompasses everything. So the energy efficiency audits, the environmental audits, ecosystem audits, maybe product audits, carbon footprint audits. So at a conceptual level, all of them fall under green audits. But I have not seen this NAC particular guidelines or regulation that you're talking about. Probably they are clear about two aspects: energy efficiency and environmental audit. These are more, there is more clarity on these two. The environmental audits have been there for very long, and it has been happening for industries for very long. So this clarity on what is being audited, maybe air quality, water quality, etc. Energy efficiency is also very clear, and government has come up with its own guidelines on energy efficiency, especially if you see energy efficiency certificates or Bureau of Energy Efficiency certifying energy auditors, energy managers, and giving out guidelines on it. So they have probably good clarity on these two aspects: energy efficiency audits and environmental audits. The rest of them all fall under probably green audit according to them. But what is the definition of green audit? I think they have to give clarity. Probably you could rise as a stakeholder, could ask them what constitutes green audit. Does it include carbon footprint audit? Does it include biodiversity audit? Does it include anything else, waste management or waste generation? So it could be anything. So I think if they have given any FAQs, frequently asked questions, they have given already a clarification through amendment or anything, that's fine. But otherwise, probably they are the only people who can answer this question. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
please. Yes, please.
Yeah, sir, myself is Dr. Vijay Fate, and
Yeah, Dr.
I'm
Vijay.
also a CSR consultant.
Oh,
And
great.
when I work with in organizations, there is an employee engagement program.
Yeah,
And as for the CSR, even the
yeah,
employee from organization are doing their individual contributions. So
correct.
same in that phase that we would like even institutes to follow the same and promote the faculty and students to engage into the social responsibility activity, what I
Right.
call that ISR. And another thing is
Okay.
that I want to have your view on
Hmm.
how about that the government is formulating some kind of guidelines or legal statutory requirement for
Mm-hmm.
individual as a ISR guidelines.
Okay. So let me break that into two questions. The first thing is, it's pretty appreciative that you are looking at the same model that corporates have been following. So there is employee volunteering, employee contribution. So that has been there for quite long. And if you look at some of the big corporate companies, so this is a annual program, and it's taken very seriously. Like, they really put all the efforts to get their employees motivated, engaged in this kind of programs, CSR programs. Excuse me. I think there's some disturbance in the background. They are doing it. I think if you adopt that concept even in academic institutes or any other organization, I think it's a very good move. The more you create the awareness and more you motivate people, and the more people come forward to do this, I think altogether we can push the boundaries and then go to the next level even quickly than what we otherwise would do. So that is good, I think. You can take some of the social responsibility related courses, or maybe there are a lot of free webinars and courses that's happening. So there is something called storytelling. I think some of you may be aware of, like how, in fact, the presentation that I have made is also, I have designed in storytelling format, not technical format. Like, you have to start somewhere and you have to give step by step, like where it is going and where it is concluding. So if you give that kind of flow to a cause, to a problem, I think the people will receive it a lot more, with a lot more enthusiasm and lot more interest. So if you adapt those practices, I think you can generate a lot more interest level than otherwise you would be able to do. Secondly, you can look at different platforms that they are working in the direction, crowdfunding platforms that we call it. We have Keto, Indiegogo, GoFundMe. So these are all the platforms where you can create a story, where you can create a cause on that platform, and you can share the link for people to contribute. Maybe internal, maybe external, anyone can go and contribute, and that becomes a fund for you to act on the issues, whatever, environmental, biodiversity, social, or anything that the cause want to address. And the second question about government making it mandatory. So far, government has made it mandatory for the corporates and the businesses, but not for the employees or the individuals. So far, it is not, and the government is only charging the income tax or the corporate tax or individual tax, whatever it is. So I think government will not get to individual level, but government may get to institutional level or organization level. So they may move ahead further from just businesses. They may also come into universities and academic institutes and ask them to practice social and environmental responsibilities. Maybe not as intensive as industries, because I don't see a lot of pollution, but of course there is still considerable impact, given large number of people, large activities happen every year at these campuses and institutes. So the individual contributions, I would say it may remain voluntary forever. In fact, I forgot to tell that India is the only country in the world which made corporate social responsibility mandatory by law. There is no other country in the world which has mandated this, still voluntary. So even making this mandatory at corporate or business level raised a lot of eyebrows in 2013, because even the most advanced countries didn't take that step, whereas India took. So I think even for universities and academic institutes, I think it will take a lot more time, but it's coming indirectly. Like what we are talking about, the green audit by NAC is in a way like, they are asking the organization, asking the universities to adopt to these practices as part of their accreditation. So it will come indirectly. It may not come as a separate law or something. But I think at individual level, it is more of motivating them, sensitizing them, creating awareness, and talking more, maybe conducting more this kind of sessions would help in bringing that awareness and motivating people for this.
Thank you, Vijay Kumar Machagaru. Dear participants, we are running short of time and the next speaker is ready. We are sorry to take your all questions. So you can mail your questions to Mr. Vijay Kumar Machagaru. We'll be providing his mail ID. Please excuse us for not taking all your queries. Over to Dr. Shasikala, madam.
Thank you very much, Vijay Kumar. You have given a very wonderful lecture, which is very, very, it is the thing which this green audit short-term course we need. Actually, there was a lacuna that you might have talked even about the educational institution, but finally you also spoke about the educational institutions, how it has to be done and all. Now I request Nageshwar Rao sir to give reflect on the just session.
Yeah, thank you, madam. On behalf of the organizing committee, entire organizing committee, and the participant, it's my privilege to propose vote of thanks to Mr. Vijay Kumar, project lead and independent researcher. Thank you very much, sir, for your very informative, elaborative, detailed, very cool lecture this afternoon. We hope that there are so many questions in the chat box. We'll surely forward those questions to you, and we request the participants to post the questions to SAR mail. We will share that one because lack of time and running short of time. I take this opportunity to thank you from the organizing committee once again, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this, and I think we keep interacting and doing more such work going forward. Thank you all the participants. Thank you for listening patiently. Yeah.
Now the next speaker is Shaili Malo. Ms. Shaili Malo, who is going to speak about the carbon accounting for low carbon pathways. Please, Shaili Malo. Shaili Malo, madam.
She is available, madam. You can ask Karthik to introduce her.
Now, Karthik will be introducing today's speaker.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon, one and all. I welcome to all participants to 6 days National Short-Term Course on Green Audit and conducted by the Department of Environmental Science, University of College of Science and Osmania University, Hyderabad. People who feel good about themselves do great works and create great things. One such person is here. She is Shaili Malo, ma'am. It's my privilege to introduce ma'am. It's Shaili Malo, ma'am. Shaili Malo, ma'am, is having experience of over 15 years in the field of climate change and sustainability. Madam is also an IITian and alumnus of IIT Kanpur. Madam worked with Ernst and Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers together for 7 years. And as well as Madam have been working as an independent consultant since 2014 and empaneled with NAPCAN and API TCO. And also, She has been an advisor to EPTRI for about 4 years, where
Karthik.
policy and
Pause for a minute, Karthik.
yeah.
Madam, your audio is not clear, madam. Shiloh, madam.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, madam.
Is my audio clear?
Yes, madam.
Yes,
Now it is clear, madam. Kindly be on mute, madam. You can unmute later. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, she's have been an advisor to EPTRI for about 4 years, where policy and government advisory activities projects were carried out and represented the states and institute at various forums. And as well as Madam is having experience of working with corporates on sustainability, climate change is extensive, and as well as strategic advisor to international agencies like CDEP, TCFT, and DGSA. And also, ma'am is having associated with pharmaceutical sector, apparel sector, port sector, metal and mining sector, power sector, chemical sector, iron and steel sector, cement sector. And madam, and I can say that madam is worked with several state action plans on climate change of the different state. And madam also authored to the climate change chapter of State Environment Report of 2015, which is released by the Minister of Environment, Government of India. It's privilege to have you as a speaker of the today's session, ma'am. And thank you so much. And floor is yours. Shali, ma'am.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Karthik, for giving such an elaborate and wonderful introduction. Quite amazed to hear that. And thank you, Madam, for giving me the opportunity to speak in this session. I understand from her that there are about 250 participants in today's presentation, which is quite admirable on a Sunday to have such a huge audience here. I hope the video is available now. Earlier there was some problem with the video. So keeping the timing in view, I think we are at 3:35. We were to start at 3. Is there a need for me to get my presentation a little shortened, or should I continue the way it is planned so that we end it in a timely manner?
You can continue, madam.
You can continue. You can continue.
As it is.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen in a moment. Is it visible to all?
Yes, madam.
So today's topic that has been chosen for me is carbon accounting. And I would like to link carbon accounting to the development of a low carbon pathway, which is very, very essential to understand. Because often we've heard conversations all around, and the conversations tend to be about, just carbon accounting. But a pure carbon accounting might not be that useful until and unless we understand what it will lead to. So it's essential to understand that when we say carbon accounting, what do we mean? What is our objective? What is the purpose? And where we will be leading to? That helps in defining and setting the background for doing a good carbon accounting. That is foremost and most important in my eyes to any successful carbon accounting. As the previous speaker was also talking, Mr. Vijay was talking about being consistent, being able to replicate your carbon accounting. That is very important. So quickly, what do we expect to see in this session? And before that, a very important thing is that men argue and nature acts. That's something that I found was written by the great Voltaire. And I see a lot of meaning in this statement, because it is often seen that if there are 10 people, 2 will argue, for doing the accounting, and 8 will say don't. And that's not just true for carbon accounting, that's true for so many things that we intend to do under climate, green, sustainability, environment, so many titles we give it to, but ultimately it is about acting right. So about acting right, there'll be lots of conversation, there'll be lots of debate before people act, but nature is not waiting for us to continue doing that debate. It is still acting. That is a very, very important aspect that all should keep in mind, considering that we have a large researcher society available here in this conversation. I'm certain they would understand the importance of this. In my session, I'll very briefly cover about the definition of carbon accounting, why a carbon accounting is conducted, who does carbon accounting, why do they carry out a carbon accounting, how to carry out a carbon accounting. These are the key 5 elements on which I'll be touching upon. The subject is so vast that honestly, in 1 hour, we'll only be able to actually just touch the tip of the iceberg, if I may say so. And it requires actually a kind of a complete session, a complete 2-month kind of a course to understand in depth how to carry out a carbon accounting. And that's why I will not try to get into the nitty-gritties of doing a step-by-step for all the activities, but maybe I'll touch upon 1 or 2 activities on how the steps go forward. But I would definitely touch about all that it is linked to, so that whenever we are attempting it holistically and not attempting it as something which is outside lying there, hanging there as just a number that it is going to give, because that number will lead to many severe and very important consequences, whether they are political consequences, financial consequences, or personal consequences, reputational consequences. It has a lot many consequences, whether we talk about an individual, a company, or a country. So there are many definitions that one can give to carbon accounting. Before that, let's take a look at what an individual's life cycle footprint looks like. So any of us in the entire day, month, year, or in our entire life cycle consume or get interacted with many items. To say so, these can be divided into the resources that we take from forest, the resources that we take in terms of energy, the resources that are used in grazing those animals, whom or products of whom we utilize for our existence, the croplands where crop grows for us to survive, the urban infrastructure that we utilize, and all the factories and industries that are set around it, and not to forget water and water-related resources like the ocean, the sea, the beaches, and everything else that we consume in some fashion or the other in our entire life cycle. And this footprint of every individual contributes to the environmental footprint. And inside that footprint of environment is a small portion, which is the carbon footprint of every individual. And it is very interesting to see that this picture is very common. Many of you must have seen this picture, but this picture speaks a whole lot. It shows that we human beings are probably consuming a lot more than the resources that are available in this environment for all of us to be able to survive for a very long time in a sustainable manner. So there is a need for each one of us to understand what is the amount of resource that we are consuming, how much we are consuming, and what is that delta that we can contribute to reducing the consumption. And hence comes the importance of accounting, because without accounting, we don't know how much and how that delta can be arrived. So why out of all the environmental accounting practices, we see that the carbon accounting has gained significant importance? Since it's a very learned audience, some of these fundamentals would already be understood, but I'll just reiterate to them. So basically, all the from the Earth's atmosphere, from the Earth, due to all the activities that we are carrying out and the activities which are naturally happening in the environment or in the natural surroundings, there are gases which are getting released. And some of these gases get trapped in the system and they're not able to leave our atmosphere. When these gases are not able to leave the atmosphere, after getting trapped, they tend to stay there and increase the Earth's temperature in certain ways. And the effect is known as the greenhouse gas effect in the most simplest plain terms, without putting any terminology that can be used. But this is the plain simple fact. Since that happens, there are a lot of other negative impacts that occur because of excessive heat getting trapped, because of the greenhouse gases getting trapped. And this phenomena in turn leads to catastrophes, leads to activities which are not desirable, leads to situations which are not desirable, like heat, extreme weather, cyclones, etc., which human beings have been experiencing forever, but their intensity, their time frame, and their severity, all three have increased in the very recent past. And as you might be aware of the IPCC, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's various reports, findings, and the future understanding, that if we do not reduce these gases to a certain defined level, we will not be able to contain and sustain the Earth the way we know it. So from that perspective, the greenhouse gases, which are also known as the carbon gas, which are also linked to the term carbon and climate, become important, and hence the accounting of carbon. So how big is our carbon footprint is what we essentially want to understand. The definition here is a very general definition. Again, there are many ways and many places that this definition has been put out. These resources are easily and comfortably available for each and every one to look at and understand. So basically, carbon accounting is nothing but a measure of how much greenhouse gas emission is occurring due to any activity, person as an individual in the life cycle of a product, or it could be in the operations of an organization or the government. So it is an accounting which can be applied not to just one situation or a phenomena, but it is an accounting which can be applied to anything and everything, literally speaking. So it can be applied to individuals, it can be applied to corporates, it can be applied to an institution, even colleges can apply green accounting to them. It can be applied to states, it can be applied to government, it could be applied to a product. For example, if we are using a laptop or a computer at this point in time, there's an accounting that can be done for this. A full carbon accounting can be done for the usage of a laptop. So it is that detailed an exercise that can be done. And it has been done for various products. Now, having put forward the definition of carbon accounting, what all does it include? When we talk about greenhouse gas, it is not one single gas, which is called a greenhouse gas, but it is a bunch or an array of gases which together account for the greenhouse gas effect, which leads to climate change. And this set of gases is known as greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide is a very, very well-known gas when it comes to green accounting. The second known gas is methane, then nitrous oxide, perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. These are the top 6 gases that have been identified from the greenhouse gas accounting perspective. So these top 6 gases contribute the most to the greenhouse effect, while there are many other gases which can indirectly contribute, but generally speaking, these 6 gases contribute, and they have their individual global warming potential. And from the potential perspective, carbon dioxide seems to have the lowest global warming potential because that's the base gas for calculation. And all the other 5 gases mentioned here have much higher global warming potential, that we tend to focus a lot more on carbon dioxide because that's a gas that gets released in almost all the activities when we talk about carbon accounting. Whereas the other gases may or may not be involved in as a part of the emissions over there. Now, the topic is carbon accounting to low carbon pathway, to development of low carbon pathway. Why low carbon pathway? So I thought it is important that we put all the parts of climate together to better understand where the concept of carbon accounting fits into it and where it lies. So the concept of carbon accounting is like the most basic or the fundamental starting point, and it leads to many more steps after that to be taken up by whoever is carrying it out or by those for whom it's being carried out. So it's like a big leap that you take from when you go from carbon accounting to low carbon pathway. A carbon accounting on one side will give you, a theoretical number, a good to have number, which you can carry with you. Oh, okay, our carbon emission is XYZ. I can very nicely carry it everywhere saying that my carbon emission is 1,000 tons. But what 1,000 tons? 1,000 tons of CO2, 1,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. Important to understand that. Okay, 1,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. Where did it come from? What all did it contribute to? Understanding that story is important. Having understood that this is the emission, what next? If all of us have been able to do a carbon accounting and all of us know what our emission levels are, what next to it? So the next that evolves out of that carbon accounting is, what can I do to reduce it, and reduce it? So to do that, you have to develop an action plan, an action point. For the action point to be implementable, finances have to be attached to it. And then the actual implementation has to happen on ground. So what is calculated on the left-hand side of this entire presentation that we see on the left-hand side called carbon accounting is actually a very, very serious and important figure. And it should not be taken lightly when one is carrying out the exercise, as it will lead to serious financial implications when you try to develop your low carbon pathways, because the choices that you take on the low carbon pathway development will be affected by it significantly. Next. So good. I need to do a carbon accounting and I need to develop a low carbon pathway going forward and take all this financial expenditure. But why? That why I would like to put it down and break it down for you in very, very simple language, in very, very simple terms, and not in very complicated ways, and want to show a very holistic picture. On the left-hand side, I'm saying that I should do it because it's a good to do thing. As an individual, yes, maybe I might like to do it as it is a good to do thing. To know how much are my emissions? Okay, yes. Because I want to act responsibly, so I'll find out and I'll then act on it. Maybe yes. I want to know my contribution. Okay, I want to know my contribution to the entire Earth's GHG emissions. But if that was the only reason, it would not have been or it would not have become a central point for a country like India or for any other country. And it would not be the central point of so many things that are getting driven, of a national action plan, of a ministry like Ministry of Environment and Forest being renamed as MOEFCC going forward, climate change. So is carbon accounting also must be very, very important. Yes, it is. It is absolutely a strategic thing. It needs strategic solutions and it needs strategic planning. Why is it so strategic? It is strategic because whether we talk of a corporate, I'm leaving the individuals aside right now, though certain individuals, high-profile individuals also take it into account as seriously as maybe the corporates. But for the moment, I will park them aside and I'll talk only from the corporate and the government point of view. For both of them, it is very important because it carries reputation risk. Carbon accounting result, not the carbon accounting alone, but the result of carbon accounting, the emissions that they show, they carry a reputation risk, carry financial risk, regulatory risk, customer pressure, and community risk. I'll try to explain them in the following slides. If there are further questions on this part, please do let me know. Because this risk is a very, very important driver. This risk is a driver why the accuracy of carbon accounting counts more and why the actions on what you find in your carbon accounting have become so significant. So going down, these were all the reasons why you were doing a carbon accounting. They will also be the reasons why you will do a low carbon pathway. In addition to that, there is one more new term which is quite often used now, is climate proofing of investment. That means the climate change is not only increasing the number in terms of greenhouse gases or the GHG emissions that are out, which you're calculating as carbon, but it is also leading to activities which will have a detrimental impact on the infrastructure and hence on the investment that has gone into the infrastructure. Here, the picture that I show on the right-hand side is a very local picture. A lot of you might be aware of. This picture is from the area near the Prasad IMAX near Hussain Sagar Lake, where because of excessive rainfall in one single day, the road has caved down. Now, it is not very easy to correlate and say that this activity happened primarily because of climate change, but there are certain other activities where it is very obvious to say so that it is a result of climate change. Often, such things are a combination of climate change and other external parameters put together. So, taking this very small example of the picture that you see on the right-hand side, this road has caved in. That means there is a risk to life, that is my community. There is a risk that is there, that has risen over here in terms of the, it is the public infrastructure. So the reputation of the public infrastructure in the eyes of media and all others who are concerned about it. And third, there is a risk here in terms of financials, though the financial risk in this particular case and all the other risks might be very limited and small in nature, but the similar risk becomes many fold when we talk about other things like cyclones and heat stress. And cyclone is much easier to quantify, but heat stress is difficult to quantify. So to say so, the results of carbon accounting are very essential because the low carbon pathways that get evolved will be in line with that. And if they are not right, the climate proofing investments would need to be much higher. Climate proofing of investments is a very large topic in itself, so I will park the topic and not get into the details. Otherwise, we'll get digressed. And we'll move further. This was just to give you a glimpse of that, how each one is interlinked. And definition, typically to say what is climate proofing, Asian Development Bank's definition I've picked up here. for you to have a more technical understanding of this. So climate proofing is the term which is used for identifying risk to a developmental project or any other specified natural or human asset as a consequence of climate variability and change, and ensuring that those risks are reduced to acceptable levels through long-lasting, environmentally sound, economically viable, and socially acceptable changes implemented at one or more of the following stages in the project cycle. That is from planning, design, construction, operation, and decommissioning. So we do activities here with the government and many other organizations where we put down and say, look, these are the XYZ things that need to be done right at the planning stage, at the DPR stage, if you're developing a road infrastructure, if you're developing a residential complex, if you're developing water structure, if you're developing a waste management site, for example. Let me give you this example because this is typically from Telangana. We're running a World Bank project where a lot of municipalities were involved. And as a result of this project, we saw that there's a landfill for which the site was identified, and the site was identified at a place which was very close to another area which is susceptible to getting flooded during monsoon. Now, this sounds like, okay, only that area, but on account of climate change, when the vulnerability hazard analysis is done, we realize that what is being proposed as a location for waste management does not have significant elevation, and this will also very soon get into the similar trouble point. And hence, the recommendation was to either pre-elevate that site significantly, which is very difficult when you're doing a waste management project. It's not always feasible, or shift the site. So probably the site shifting was taken. I do not know the results of it, but these were the proposals that were given as a result of this. Coming back to why conduct carbon accounting, once again, now this is where we saw that how it gets linked till your financial investments on one side when we were talking about the government side. The other part is carbon markets. So something that got evolved in 2000, in the start of year 2000, were known as carbon markets, which were of two types, voluntary and compliance markets. And under these carbon markets, typically there was a trading of a gas which was happening, and that trading was not a physical trading of the gas, but the trading of the certificates. So when the trading of the certificates happens, how the carbon accounting has been done, how have you calculated for a particular project activity that my greenhouse gas emissions, my carbon account of this project is XYZ becomes essential. And these were being purchased by other countries and by industries in other countries. For example, a thermal power plant in UK would also do its own carbon accounting to understand what are their emission levels. They have a regulatory requirement there. As I said earlier, they have a regulatory requirement over there to put down that how much is their carbon emission and declare it. Once that is declared, and they have to carry out to understand to what extent they can further reduce it by their own acts. When they cannot determine any further reduction, there is still some gap left on the levels that the government wants them to reach to, then they go ahead and purchase the emission reduction activities by someone else, somewhere else in the globe, through these kind of markets. These markets have definitely evolved, taken shape, have seen a downside, and a lot has happened, but still the markets do exist, and more in the voluntary format. So when they have come forward to buy the project, for example, in India, somebody has set up a wind power project, somebody has set up a solar power plant, somebody has got, say, for example, the chemical industry where you're manufacturing urea, and there you say, okay, I will shift from a gas called natural gas to naphtha, or from naphtha to natural gas, or I will shift to, from naphtha to natural gas, or I will shift to some portion of my this thing to a solar or a wind energy based program, then you reduce energy emissions. Now, how accurately you're estimating that is essential. It is very, very important. So the accounting practice has to be very clear, and that accounting practice follows a very different set of rules. So the set of rules for such kind of accounting practices are determined by something known as UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. From there are set methodologies for each and every type of activity. More than 100 methodologies exist on how you calculate your greenhouse gas emission reduction, because there is a monetary transaction involved here and an international transaction which goes via the government. And so it is those methodologies that are applied here. I have actually not put a link to that. I can send it separately, the UNFCCC link. So if you're going to be doing a GHG accounting for those purposes, then the UNFCCC or something known as gold standards will apply to finding out how much is the emission reduction. Now, in the previous slide, I spoke also about the pressure from the customer. This is something which is applicable to the corporate world. The companies who are operating, they often get a request from the customers to tell how much is their GHG emission. They don't ask just the GHG emission, but they tend to ask a lot of things. However, certain companies do get requests, especially to disclose everything related to their climate. It is not just related to carbon emission or carbon accounting, but it is related to everything related to climate that they want to know, which involves your low carbon pathway. So what I've highlighted in the orange box here, the emission methodology, emission data, and emission breakdown. Now, breakdown could be in terms of where all that emission is happening and within what activities it is happening. So geographic and activity wise, the emission breakdown is what they ask for. This is very often asked to a famous disclosure called the Climate Disclosure Project. Just for your information, I have also put on the right hand side, it's called water disclosures. So far we've talked a lot about carbon disclosures and carbon accounting. Now, water accounting is a topic which has also gained significant prominence, and the reason for its prominence is this water stress that we're observing across the globe, and water is being termed as the next most important raw material into any process, into any activity. So today it is not priced heavily in most of the world, but it is known to be a very essential raw material which is becoming depleted, which is decreasing, and it is very, very stressed out. So there is a customer requirement, an investor pressure that I want to know how well you're addressing these two. They want to know how much is your carbon emission, because that person is also responsible for seeing how his supply chain works. For example, the pharma sector which is very, very prominent in Hyderabad, is already seeing this pressure. There are companies like Dr. Reddy's Laboratories who disclose to the Carbon Disclosure Project every year for several years now. And the reasons are because they have been requested to disclose on these, and then at the end of the disclosure, there's a rating that happens. So it is not just, okay, you give a emission and that's okay. No, because there's a rating that will happen. And also these disclosure projects compare your last 2 years, 3 years data. They ask you also to describe what changes you have seen in your own data and your own practices. So this is something known as the Carbon Disclosure Project. The link is right on top. I've taken the screenshot from there and pasted for you to have a feel of what a carbon disclosure project is like. So they are looking for a sustainable economy. They've started asking about forest also, because forests are a major source of carbon sink. So there's a separate disclosure on forest wherever it is relevant. And mind you, the CDP does not restrict itself to corporates, but CDP disclosures are sent to state governments also. There are not all state governments who get this disclosure, but those who are aligned to certain other alliances and partnerships, they get to, they're requested to disclose on this topic. Another important way where this gets related as to how well you're doing your carbon accounting is with something called the Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. It is a relatively newer initiative, but it is an initiative completely driven by the financial side, by the Financial Stability Board, and the names that you see on the right and many more who are all those who are all financially linked to companies, and they want to see that what is the financial implication of how you're managing your two greenhouse gases. Two things: one, the greenhouse gases, and the second thing on how you're managing the risks that are arising out of climate change. And this is typically how they are recommending and supporting organizations to disclose on climate change, to the extent that this has become something core to the financial annual report, where the balance sheet is shared by companies. It has become a core part of their disclosure in certain companies. And if you see on the right hand side, the orange oval thing, and below that the rectangular box which I have got, they are clearly showing that the matrices and targets, the targets that you put on how much greenhouse gas emission you're going to reduce, is being asked and is clearly linked to how you measure your scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. The description of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 I'll be discussing in the subsequent slides, probably in another 5 minutes time. And who and why I just explained. I'll not get further into the who and why of that. I'll give you just one more example of the reputation pressure. I think in the previous presentation, there was a mention of Dow Jones Sustainability Index being an important disclosure point. So the Dow Jones Sustainability Index is one of the largest business and financial news companies in the world, and they have a lot of analytics and they disclose data. This illustration that I have got from you is a company's illustration of how they are scored. So if you see there's a company score, there's a percentile, industry average. So they're scoring companies on so many parameters, starting from corporate governance and everything, and going down in the environmental dimension and talking about climate strategy. So inside climate strategy, they ask for information related to the carbon accounting. That is the importance. And then they score companies depending upon how well they are able to relate to it. See, there is enough marks. They give 7 marks for climate out of 100 on several parameters. Out of that, they see climate to be such an important aspect. So the first step to a good strategy is to know how your carbon footprint is. You all might be well aware that under goal number 13 of climate change in Sustainable Development Goals lies the climate action goal. And India is well aligned to it. Our nationally determined contribution is well aligned to it. And this is what is making the government's work on it. So just for your information, yes, just for your information, the government of India also submits its national accounting to the UNFCCC and the other related parties biannually, once in 2 years. So that's an exercise that India also does. India has already made several submissions on this account. So the carbon accounting is also done on the national level. In India, we still don't have a state level GHG accounting, which is to be done mandatorily. However, several states have gone ahead and carried out their own GHG accounting. And while doing that, they have mostly chosen the IPCC protocol for doing this accounting along with the other national guideline, etc. So the National Statistical Organization is the one which also has a publication on this. And the National Accounting on Climate is available publicly to view on the UNFCCC website. You can see other countries' accountings as well, that how it has been carried out. So what I would like to highlight is that the procedure and the way of carrying out carbon accounting is something which is so much available in the public domain that often what we tend to lose out is the understanding that how seriously it impacts the financial decisions, and that is why it is an important exercise. So if you approach anyone and say that you must do climate accounting or a carbon accounting, please do also let them understand what are the implications of it, and why it should be done thoroughly and not with just thumb rules like a lot of people want to do often. They just want to pick up thumb rule figures and do the accounting and say, oh, we know what is our carbon emission. But with that, they will lose out in the long run, is what they need to understand. So from the government perspective, from the central government perspective, we have, as a nation, have our GHG accounting done. Our GHG accounting is based on a lot of secondary data, which is collected from several areas, and appropriate methodologies are applied. We have sectoral emissions calculated, and all these feed into the government strategy of how we go forward with doing our own GHG mitigation plans and achieving the targets that the government has aligned to. Now, we'll get a little into some of the fundamentals of carbon accounting. But as I said in the starting, it is a very vast topic. And to be able to understand how to do accounting, it has n number of scenarios. And for each scenario, probably about half an hour to 1 hour should be spent to understand how the accounting is done. I will take a very generic overview of the accounting, and if there are specific questions on accounting, I'll try my best to answer them. So how to carry out a carbon accounting? Like most of the accounting, the carbon accounting also today is got well-established standards. And the snapshot that I've put here belongs to the GHG protocol. It has the standard to measure and manage emissions. This is very well-known, well-accepted standard for doing the carbon emission accounting or the GHG accounting for a product, for an office, for a building, for an institution, like the educational institutions. It gives you a very good guideline on how to do it for the educational institutions. It highlights on how to go forward and do this accounting for corporates. Some of the principles of the standard can also be applied by the cities and states. Because it has a generic standard also, which can be applied to cities and states. Over and above that, it gives sectoral tools. Like there are sectors like pulp and paper, iron and steel, which may have a certain specific process and a requirement, which cannot be addressed by the other or the general accounting methods. So for such sectors, there are specific sector tools. I would request all those who want to understand more on how to do the carbon accounting to please make a note of the GHG protocol. It's ghgprotocol.org, and you could go through. It has a wide range of tools and standards to carry out calculations. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, that today there is something known as science-based targets. Another organization, and this organization is working towards seeing that the targets that the different companies take up on climate change. They say, I will reduce my carbon emissions by 5%. I will reduce them by 20% by 2025, by 2030. And some of them they say have intensity-based targets. They say, my emission intensity will reduce by 15% in the next 5 years or 10 years as against my revenue. So they are making an attempt to see that what is the basis? On what basis did you say I will reduce 5%, 10%? If you have got thousands and thousands or lakhs and lakhs of emission and you're saying 10%, that's a big number. On what basis have you come out? Or maybe it could be a small number for another organization. Maybe there is more potential in that particular organization or in that particular sector. So they are taking a very scientific approach to it, and their approach is ultimately to see that there's a 1.5 degree reduction that takes place in the carbon accounting, in the emissions overall, as much as, so they start with the basis that the emission reduction should be at 1.5 and how companies should go behind it on that. So that also there again, the usage of the right protocol becomes important, because there for them to work further or to be able to say that, no, your target is not right, come up with a target, your emission estimation counts first. So please use GHG protocol. It is a well-established protocol. Most of the organizations use it to measure and manage emissions. So as I just said, 9 out of 10 Fortune 500 companies would be using this protocol. And it is a very simple protocol. In fact, if we talk about implementing it at institutional level, in my role at EPTRI, I am not sharing it, but we did do a small exercise to understand what was the GHG emission or what was the carbon footprint of EPTRI. It was for an internal purpose. It was an internal exercise we did carry out. And that's an example of how an institution can do its GHG accounting using the same GHG protocol. So fundamentally, when we talk about carbon accounting, first most important item is to understand where all the emissions are happening. So if I take the example of an educational institute, for example, and I say I want to find out what is the carbon account or what is the net GHG emission happening from, say, for example, Osmania University, I'm just throwing out as an example. What do I first need to understand? I first need to understand and draw a list of all the activities happening as a result of the institute's activities, which would be resulting in GHG emission. What could be those activities? The first activity is consumption of power. To run an institute, you need electricity, you need energy. So consumption of electricity becomes your first source of emission, right? The second source of emission for such a place would be if power goes away. If there is no power, what would you do? You would try to have diesel generators to run the most basic or important power functions of the institute. So you would have DG sets. To run DG sets, you would be utilizing fuel. So the fuel consumption for your DG sets becomes number 2. Number 3, if you have a canteen or if you have a centralized air conditioning system, then you would have something called HVACs for the centralized air conditioning systems. The other thing is there are places where the refrigerant gas has to be refilled, and such areas which could lead to, again, some leakages of greenhouse gases whenever the refilling happens. So these are 3 primary quick things that come to your mind. In addition to that, if it's a very big campus and if you have acres and acres of plantation over there, which has not been touched, huge trees, then that's a big sink. Because it is not that we just keep emitting greenhouse gases and there's nobody to absorb it. We do have our green nature to absorb. In addition, it is also known that sea to some extent absorbs. So your green nature is the first one that you see as the absorption point. So if that's in substantial amount, we would go and say, okay, I'm emitting, this is where I'm absorbing. The other thing, this is all within the campus, but what about each and every one who has to reach that campus, not in the corona times, but generally speaking, each and everyone who has to reach the campus to take the classes, to attend the classes and to run the institute, they would all be traveling from various places in different modes of transport. Those mode of transport could be generally in our Hyderabad kind of a situation. It will be either a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. And now with the metro coming by, we may have metro or we may have our MMTS facilities being utilized and buses. Generally, these are, and in some cases, the auto rickshaws could be the ones. So these are the top 5 or 6 modes of communication that we have. Cycling is a very limited mode of commuting, sorry, not communication, commuting that we have at this point in time. So these are the ways that people are likely to travel. Now, when you travel by all of these, you're again consuming some or the other fuel. Or if it is a metro, you're consuming electricity. So this is also going to lead to GHG emissions. Now, having said all this, is this it? No. Each and every product that is there inside that campus will also cause greenhouse gas emissions. All the laptops that you use, all the other equipments that you have, all the other facilities. So for that matter, to make anything, there is a likelihood that some greenhouse gas emission would have happened. All the furniture that you have, it is also made out of wood. So the trees have been felled, that much sink has been reduced. So that emission. However, what is important is to understand that measuring 100% emission from all the sources is generally not practical. And that is where it becomes important. I'll just go. Yes, there's a term here I've got called boundary setting. That is the second last term. It becomes important to understand that there is a boundary to be set, that what all I will say is a part of my emission and what all is not a part of my greenhouse gas emissions. Before we get to that, so now we divide our emissions into usually 3 parts known as scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 emissions are the direct emissions. As I was explaining in the case of the institute, all the emissions which are happening within the boundary wall or within the premise of the institute would contribute to scope 1 emissions. That means emissions on account of all the DG set related emission that you take place over there, or any other fuel that you burn inside your university. And in case you have a solar or a wind related energy source which is set up inside your institute, that will contribute to scope 1, which is called direct emission. Now, some may have a question that what happened to all the electricity that we were consuming? Where did it suddenly disappear? So all the electricity that you were consuming hasn't disappeared anywhere. It's still there. It's just that it is not getting produced within the boundary walls. It is coming from outside. So anything that's coming from outside will become a scope 2 emission known as indirect emission. So any form of energy, so scope 2 is related to any form of energy that you utilize to carry out the activities within the boundary of your operation is called scope 2 emission. In this case, the scope 2 emission would be all the electricity that you've consumed from the grid. So from the grid, you got electricity, all that you consumed contributed to your scope 2 emissions. That is scope 2 indirect emission. The third part, the lower 2 circles, is the most difficult and the most elaborate set of emission that you have. From an institute's perspective, I said all of you commuting to the institute, that will become your scope 3 emission. That means it is an indirect emission. On this emission, all the emission that has happened outside the boundary of the institute. For example, the fuel and energy related activity, or employee commuting. We see something called employee commuting over here on the slide. That contributes to your scope 3 emission. There's another term called business travel here. But that could be true for the institute as well. If there is an opportunity for, or there's a need for some researcher to go out of the institute and present a paper in some other city or outside the country, you would travel. You would travel on behalf of the institute. This emission will become your business-related travel and emission. Similarly, any professor who has to travel for invigilation, presentation, etc., or on account of any work related to the institute, outside the institute, within the city or outside the city, would also contribute to a business travel. Now just close your eyes for a moment and think how many such kind of activities would be happening within your institute or your organization. There would be multiple, many. And they will run often in 1 year, they can run into thousands and thousands of activities. In some cases, it could be hundreds also. But in certain cases, they do run into thousands, especially in companies where which involves them to travel to and fro to multiple sites, etc. And where there are 10,000, 20,000 employees, they run into large numbers of these. And the mode of travel also keeps varying. Sometimes it could be a flight, it could be a car, it could be a bus. So it could be a train. So it could be a ship rarely, but yeah, that's also a possibility. So imagine the amount of data that would be there to be utilized to calculate the emissions. It is going to be extremely huge. So in such cases, these things will fall under scope 3 indirect emission, and a detailed calculation procedure has to be set out. Now, if we look from the left-hand side, just a moment, I'll get the pointer on. If we start looking from the left-hand side, that is the purchased goods and services. That means, as I was discussing, all the laptops, stationery, etc. that you purchase will also be manufactured somewhere and would have led to some kind of emission. That gets included. Capital goods that you use, the fuel and energy related activity. Now, if you're going to be, for example, using diesel for running the generator set, that diesel has to get produced somewhere. Again, that will lead to a fuel and energy related activity. Another thing, if you have a supplier who supplies food to your canteen, he's not an employee of the institute, but he's bringing food to the canteen. In such a case, that supplier is also utilizing fuel to run his vehicle. And that's again another source of emission which is happening outside your premise. The transportation and distribution of goods. So all the goods that you consume, if you're buying furniture, which is coming, say, from overseas, then the transportation and distribution of that furniture, till your point, is a significant emission. Waste, all the waste that comes out of an institute, I'm just talking of an institute, it's much larger when we talk about corporates. But supposing I was to take it from the viewpoint of an institute, the amount of waste that would come out as a result of all the lab related activities, as well as the canteen, if there is one, or if not just these two, there is also paper waste. And these laptops, for example, or any other instrument, would also become defunct after a certain point in time and becomes waste. So that waste has the potential to again generate greenhouse gases when it is disposed. So you need to understand how you're going to dispose it. When it is going by vehicle till the, if it's going to landfill or such a facility, then the emission in that, and the emission if it is biogenic in nature, in the process of it going into the landfill and then the methane getting generated is another set of emissions. So there are many such emissions. And the least assets. You might have some assets. So for an institute, it might not be there, but for corporates, what tends to happen is that they have some assets in terms of warehouses, etc., which are leased, or they may have sales offices, which are not owned by the organization, and they are leased assets. So they may be outside the boundary and may contribute to a indirect scope 3 emission. And then there are many more. So this is on the side of what we saw on the left hand side, everything that is coming inside an institute or in an organization. On the right hand side is what goes out. So typically in a company, when you manufacture, if you're manufacturing, say for example, say cement is manufactured, then if it has to be transported and distributed till the point of use. The same happens for a lot of garments that are manufactured in the garment industry. They need to be transported and distributed till the point of use. For example, pulp paper. Paper is manufactured, say for example, by ITC, if they manufactured at Bhadrachalam, then from there it has to be sent to the distributor, dealer, and then through a local shop or something, it will come to your institute. So that is the long transportation and distribution chain that the manufacturing facility will have after the product is manufactured, and there's an emission happening in that entire chain. The processing of sold products, as I was just discussing, these sold products can be of various nature. A product may be sold and it may be sent to another organization to be utilized. If it is going to another organization and it is to be utilized over there, then the emissions in the utilization, for example, in the pharma sector, if they make active pharmaceutical ingredients, which is APIs, they manufacture and they send it to another company, which will further convert it into the final dosage or usable form for the final consumer. So whatever process they do in their manufacturing, that will lead to another set of emissions. The next is use of sold products. So a classic example of the two classic examples of use of sold products: washing machine and laptops. Say for example, any company, for example, HP has made a laptop. Now, once that laptop is out at the consumer end, HP does not know how much electricity is being used by the consumer, but that is also in their scope 3 emission. So it's a difficult exercise. It's a very long topic of discussion. I will not get into it. Same way, washing machine. So washing machine, for each cycle of washing machine, there is a defined amount of electricity that it should be using. So companies try to utilize that that calculation to make some assumptions and come out with the use of sold product related emission. At the end of life of any product, whether it's a notebook or it's a laptop or if it's a washing machine, it will go for some end of life, and that will result in its own emissions, as I was discussing earlier. Leased assets we have discussed. Franchisees are well understood that, for example, the manufacturers of say Jockey, they will have a lot of franchisees who will be running their own setups at different places, and they would be consuming electricity. So if they have 1,000 franchisees, how much electricity has been consumed by each one of them simply to run that franchisee outlet itself would contribute a significant amount of emission. And the investments that you made, this is quite applicable to the financial institutions when they make an investment into someone else's activity, again, that can lead to emissions. So it's a very, very big array, as I was saying, in carbon accounting, to understand all the various sources of emission that exist and how to treat those emissions. But simply put, the scope 1 emission can be understood as any emission which is happening inside the boundary of your activity. There is a defined way of determining what falls in your boundary and what does not fall in your boundary. And these ways are known as two ways. One is the financial control approach and the other is the operational control approach. To put it simply, if you do not hold a financial control on something, but if you are operating it, if you are running it, if you're running that institute, and then you are the one who can make all the changes. Financial control, where you have the control, you're more than 70% stakeholder, so you have a control on how to take care of that place, you have the ability to make an investment in it. So you can change the ways things happen. That is a financial control approach. Sometimes companies have both financial and operational control, and institutes or anyone for that matter may have both financial and operational control. So that is the approach that is used to determine what will be inside your scope 1. What goes inside your scope 2 emissions is very simple. It's a much clearer way to understand any kind of energy form, whether it is electricity or fuel that is coming inside your boundary, will go into scope 2. And scope 3 is everything under which you do not have a direct control, which is taking place, is termed as scope 3. And all of these could result into the top 6 gases that you're seeing are written over here: CO2, methane, N2O, HFCs, PFCs, and SF6. Don't forget the sinks. So you may have these sinks. For example, the pulp and paper industry, they always try to build lots of sinks, and ITC is a classic example of the good sinks that they have built. The ITC story is well known. It is available for anybody to read. You can read it online. And these are the fundamentals that are used in the emission calculation. Identify your activity, quantify your activity, multiply it by a relevant emission factor, and you will get your emission. Emissions are always written in tons of CO2 equivalent. We use the word equivalent because all emissions are not CO2 emissions. But as we were seeing, based on the global warming potential, they get converted by the multiplying the relevant multiplication factor to CO2 equivalence. Now, what is an activity? I'll try to explain it a little more in the next slide. Boundary setting is an important term I just explained, and the another important term is base year. So if you start calculating your institute's emissions, for example, in this year, you do the emission estimation, you do the emission calculation, and you realize while doing it that all the procedures and documents that you require to be able to do the emission estimations are not completely set and aligned in this year. You may do the estimation, but then you will try to set your processes and procedures in order, and the following year come out with your emissions and say, this is where my base year will be, because from this year onward, I'm clear on how my emissions are determined. It is also possible that you may want to go back 2-3 years and then take an average and see, or where a particular critical activity has taken place, and say, okay, this is the year which will be termed as base year. Or you may term your base year as a year where you have not taken a lot of unusual activities, or your production has not been unusually high, which happens in certain sectors, that in one particular year they have an unusually high production, and as a result of that, they don't want to take that as a base year, because if you take that as a base year, your emissions will become very high. And then that gives you an advantage as well, because then it is easier for you to reduce your emissions in future years. But the base year setting has to be done very carefully, very calculatively. There is a way mentioned in the GHG protocol as to how you go ahead defining what is your base year. They also have another term which I have missed out here, that is called uncertainty assessment, to help understand what is the uncertainty level of the GHG emission estimation that you're making right now, where you stand, and how then you can go forward in the following years, because that gives, if you're making an external communication and if you're able to say that this is my uncertainty level, it makes a clear communication to your investor or a customer, and becomes very, very essential when we are doing it for a more important areas like a state or a city, and we're trying to drive something out of it. This is just a very simple example. It's not a full calculation, but I've tried to take it from a live calculation. So look at this company. This is a company which is procuring energy from the grid, which is electricity department. Now they are operating at 9 locations, and the first year FY16, they take the data, and as required by certain standards, they will get the data in the unit of kilowatt hour, which is 1 unit. They multiply it by the relevant factor and convert it into gigajoules. They do the same thing for all the 9 locations. Then they multiply it by the emission factor, and they arrive at the GHG emissions for all the years. Now, why have I not written the multiplication factor or the emission factor? Because it can vary for each and every one. For India, we have a certain emission factor. The grid emission factor will not remain same for other countries. It may be different for different countries as well. So, and also the grid emission factor keeps changing. It may change every year, or it may change once in few years. So for example, in India, we have the Central Electricity Authority, CEA, which gives us what is the emission factor. That means how many tons of CO2 is emitted per unit or per megawatt hour of electricity that is generated in India. We have the grid emission factors, which are divided into the northern and the southern grids based on the grids that we have in the country, and the emission factor is given. Appropriate emission factors this company has utilized, multiplied, and come out with its GHG scope 2 emissions. Another small example I have given here, which is of the GHG emission estimates. Again, these are from a scope 2 perspective. So there is a hostel. This exercise was done for a hostel. It's a real exercise where they were paying electricity bill of 10,80,000 units per month. So to see what is their annual GHG emission, we multiplied it by 12, came out with the total kilowatt hour, assuming that all 12 months the consumption is same. Now this is an assumption, so I wanted to show you that we do have to undertake assumptions at times, and that's where the uncertainties arise, because they did not have the actual bills for all the 12 months. So we had to take an assumption. But actually speaking, all the 12 months bills are taken to see how many units was consumed. They are added, and then the actual consumption is arrived at. Now here, an assumption had to be made. And please pardon the second line, it was for some other purpose. Then the CO2 emission factor for that particular location was decided to be 0.99 tons of CO2 per megawatt hour based on a certain guideline which was there. So the first unit which we got, 129.6 megawatt hour, is basically the activity data. So we need two things, activity data and the emission factor. So the activity data was 129.6 megawatt hour. We got the emission factor also, which is 0.9 tons of CO2 per megawatt hour, multiply the two, and we get the tons of CO2 per annum for one hostel. Now, if you want to set up a solar system, you know what is the size of the solar system that you need. So this was actually the objective here. We were trying to see if a solar panel is to be set up, then what are the emission, then what is the total consumption and how much emission we'll be able to save. As a result, we wanted to draw on some financial benefit. So this is one example. Now, last slide, and the most important point that I want to bring out is the attributes of a good accounting and a disclosable accounting, which can be disclosed year on year, are based on one fundamental thing: stop, think, and go. Take a very practical approach, understand it practically, and apply. Make sure that whatever you're doing represents relevant information. Take the deviations that are necessary, record the deviations carefully, be specific and complete, be clear, balanced, and understandable, consistent over time. Have your definitions clearly written out as to what is my boundary, what my boundary consists of, what is outside my boundary, what I'm taking in scope 1. So have it all clearly listed out and be consistent over time, so that the data you come out with is comparable among others in the sector, in the industry, or the portfolio, because there are certain things like internal carbon oil pricing, etc. Also that industries use, which are based on your GHG emission factors. So be very clear with it. Have a reliable, verifiable, and objective accounting. Be objective why you're doing accounting, why you want to include these things into your accounting, and why you can delete them. Because if there are things which contribute to less than 5% of your outflow in terms of monetary terms, you might want to keep them out of your accounting. There's no point including them. However, if you think that yes, it is less than 5% but can be a significant source of emission, do include them. But when both of them logically don't seem to be concluding on the higher side, please remove them. So that's how you could be objective and provide your data on a timely basis. That means if you've decided to go from a March to April cycle, consistently continue with the March to April cycle. Don't change the cycle. I had just 2 slides on the other topic, which is outside this. I'm quite in awe with this place called Mylong, which is near Shillong, and it's known as the cleanest village in Asia. And after visiting it, I always keep thinking why we don't have any such other place in India to showcase, since we have people who do care about environment and sustainability. Just thought of bringing out this thought with everyone. And I've already overshot my time, I think. So I will stop here for any further questions that might be there and that can be addressed in this time frame.
Thank you very much, Shaili Malo. It was wonderful and excellent talk given by you. Now the session is open to queries. Anybody is there? They can
Yes,
raise.
ma'am.
Yes.
Rajesham.
Use mic, madam. Meru maatladinappudu. Madam Sasikala, madam. So it will be, yeah.
Rajesham Panga, please unmute your mic and you can ask the question. Rajesham. Someone posted in question and answer, sir. Ma'am, people are talking about paperless office, but at the same time, using technology causes global warming. How to balance, and please clarify.
That is an excellent thought, actually. That's something we all need to research on. And I will just take a minute to say that here I have lost power at my end. So the internet may suddenly get disrupted. Just wanted to make sure. So what needs to, great, power is back again, so no problem. So what I would like to say is that there is a need to do a life cycle assessment in this case, because it is not about one day. And very few have done a life cycle assessment of this type. A life cycle assessment has to be done as to if you're using a laptop for 1 year, do a yearly cycle, or for 6 months, how much is the electricity consumption? Each laptop will say what is the X amount of power consumed. So do an estimation of how much power you'll consume by using laptop. Keep your, understand that if you were to use paper instead of laptop for doing the same kind of activities at the office, how much paper gets consumed, because every office has a paper estimate. In fact, there are companies who are trying to change their packaging also in this line. I work with some pharma companies who have reduced their write-ups on the medicines, or they have made the paper thinner. As simple as reducing the GSM, what they call, of the paper, has helped them save significant amount of paper. So see that what kind of paper you are using and how much emission factors are available online. Do a multiplication, come out with that emission, come out with this emission, make a study of that, and you would be able to make an assessment. Don't forget that every data that we are sharing also gets also goes on a server, and there is constant amount of power being consumed by server. We think that we put it on the server and we can forget about it. But there's constant power getting consumed. So it's a little complicated exercise. You would need somebody who can draw out this kind of data for you, but it's a doable exercise. I'm not aware of the answer, whether it is a plus or a minus, but this is how it needs to be done in terms of paperless and paper.
Yes, ma'am. One more question, ma'am. We should reduce the emission from greenhouse gases. However, due to technology available today, we can't prevent it from happening. Focusing on countermeasures will be possible and required solution. Your views, ma'am. Someone asking about your view.
The view is so simple that the GHG emissions are inevitable. That is a stand everybody understands. All that can be done is that use the technology wisely, because technology is not always for creating emissions. A lot of technologies also help us reduce emissions. So trade for a better technology is the only answer.
Yeah, ma'am. One more question. Madam, what should be the best method to dispose any used electronic devices to reduce pollution?
This is an area where a lot of work is still to happen. If you're talking about pollution overall, then please go back to authorized recyclers. There are authorized recyclers available. Now, the challenge comes when you're talking about personal usage. If you talk about big offices and corporates, usually they have a buyback kind of a system, or they have a tie-up where after every 3 years, a used laptop goes back to the manufacturer or the vendor who is supplying them the laptop. And once it reaches the manufacturer or the aggregator, it is easier to have environment-friendly disposal, because there is much tighter regulation out there. For an individual, any electronic item that you utilize, if you could have a habit putting up a bin, collecting and going to a proper mall where it can be disposed of. For example, I've seen in this mall at High Tech City, there is a recyclable bin, a big bin which used to be there. I have myself disposed of my keypad over there. So it is possible, it is doable. Only hope is that they would be doing it in turn in the right way. But it's a big topic. We'll not touch it more.
Yeah, ma'am. One more question, ma'am. What are the places where we can dispose the electronics safely?
As I just said, like there are big complexes, residential complexes like the one I'm saying here. We have already an e-waste collection bin down placed at, or one or two placed inside the campus. We can dispose there. I told you about a shopping mall where you can take in this high-tech city, where it can be disposed of. Other than that, I think there's a lot to be done by the government. Probably all the government offices should have one such big bin where they can collect and it can be taken back. But that's just a suggestion.
Good evening.
Yeah, Nivedita, ma'am, you can ask the question.
Yeah. Good evening. During this pandemic situation, we have seen the emissions of CO2 has gone down really, and why can't we, make aware of people, because of what it's happening around the world, it is indirectly causing these pandemics, because of some man-made causes, and there are so many threats to environment because of the human things which are being done. So, what is your take on this pandemic situation and the emissions?
So there are certain publications that have taken place, which are clearly showing, yes, that because of the low economic activity, the emissions went down. But again, the graph is on the upward trend. And right now, I do not think there is a study which clearly showcases that the current pandemic and GHG emissions are related, that the GHG emissions are causing the pandemic. So to that effect, we do not have a work. I do not know if a work can be done. However, yes, the pandemic did lead to a reduction and it is again on the upside. So what can be brought out is that we were on a much more sustainable life mode, perhaps. But again, for people to agree to that mode, there has to be a much bigger pressing issue. So it must get related to economics and finance. I believe nothing gets accepted more than it having a real economic or a financial sense. So we must link everything under the domain of environment, sustainability, and climate with economic and finance. And the other thing is religion. So until unless they are linked to this, it won't get accepted.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation and how you explained about what is carbon accounting and what are the necessary for carbon accounting conduct and how they carry it, what is the necessity and what is the scope for carbon accounting. Very insightful and very thank you, ma'am. And one more thing I want to add, actually, like first time like interaction with you, ma'am, but I read your articles in 2015, come to know that, because when I'm writing the civil services examination, the environment report 2015, especially the climate change, I read about that clearly. So how they you like explained with the diagrams or anything, different views about the conventions of international conventions, what are the mitigations should be taken by the India, how to take it and all. And 1901 to 1915, the temperatures and rainfall, how you explained about in the very insightful and good, ma'am. And what should be the India should take about that, and the state plan actions also, and explained in that chapter. Very thank you so much, and it's very good, ma'am.
Thank you. I didn't know somebody was reading it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we have to read, ma'am, because of the preparation. Yeah, ma'am, Shashikala, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shaili Malo. It was very wonderful and very interesting. And one more thing I would like to tell you is, one of the participant is asking another session of yours. It is very amazing to know. This is the impact which you have posed on our participants and also the organizers. Here, actually, the Miss Shaili, the participants are from different areas. Like students are there, PhD scholars are there, and faculty members are there. Diversified group is this. So you have given very clear-cut idea and procedure how to carry out carbon accounting. So it is a very understandable, and anybody can take up this and they can do in their institutions. It is their own perception how they are going to utilize this knowledge. And further, definitely in the near future, we are going to knock your door for further help and further extension of services. Thank you very, very much, ma'am. We are very happy to you are here to give your valuable information in this August gathering. Thank you very much, ma'am. Sir, do you want to reflect on this session, sir?
Nageshwar, sir.
No, madam, please continue.
So, if there are no other queries and all, now we will give this session, we will hand over this session to Srijan for the instructions. Now it is your time, Srijan. Over to Srijan.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Shailu, madam, for the wonderful presentation. Dear participants, the links have been posted in the groups and the links have been posted to you all. There are around 200 participants watching live on Zoom, and there are around 100 plus participants watching on YouTube, I guess. So far, the views on YouTube are around 400, but we request you to join on Zoom itself because your attendance will be registered in the Zoom. So we have an option for that. Whoever registers, your mail IDs will be detected on Zoom. So it becomes very easy for us to identify your attendance from here also. We will correlate the attendance forms and the Zoom feedback. We'll correlate these two things. So kindly, if it is possible, participate on Zoom itself. If it is very critical for you, then you can watch on the YouTube and reflect in the feedback forms. That is from my side, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, madam.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There is one instruction to the participants. People are putting messages in the chat box. How long this session will go? What are the timings? What are the timings tomorrow? So we have shared all complete program schedule brochure to all the participants in WhatsApp groups. Please go through the WhatsApp group. As per the schedule, we'll run the program. Here and there, because of the technical issues, if something goes wrong, we will continue the session as it is. And we also extend the session up to 5 o'clock, depends on the talk, depends on the interaction of the participants, so that time also sometimes exceeds. So kindly bear with us, and we request you to make some alternative arrangements, because mobile phones, laptops, charging may go, charging may not be sufficient. So please make sure that you have to have some alternative platform to attend the class. With this, and one more that chat box complaints kind of thing, that they have some other assignment to go, or there are some other important works to attend. But as per the program we have scheduled, we have circulated this well in advance to you. Please keep all other assignments, if whatever possible, aside, and please attend the complete session, complete course without failing any session. So because we are sending all the feedbacks of all the sessions, so you have to respond to that feedback. So if you go out of this box and you cannot respond, and then it will be difficult for us to give the positive feedback to you, a positive feedback and certificate also. So make sure that you should be in the Zoom, either Zoom or at least in YouTube, and be attentive and be regular also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Sujat.
And we can end the session.
Yes.
Yeah, tomorrow 10
yes.
o'clock we'll start again. Same.
We'll start again at 10 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bye, sir. Bye, ma'am.
Thank you,
Tomorrow,
sir. Thank
Dr. J.S. Srinivas sir is in the first session, and
Yeah.
Mr. Jovial in the second session. Please kindly join us back tomorrow. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.